Back now on Race for the White House. Separation of church and state, it may be the law, but in politics, a candidate's religious beliefs are certainly part of the debate. So to what extent does that matter to the voters? Joining me now to discuss faith and the race is Michael Gerson, Washington Post columnist and author of Heroic Conservatism, Why Republicans Need to Embrace America's Ideals and Why They Deserve to Fail If They Don't, which is now out in paperback. And Rabbi David Wolpe, he is the rabbi of Sinai Temple in Los Angeles, and Rabbi Wolpe is also the author of a brand new book, an important one, Why Faith Matters, and it hits bookstores tomorrow. Welcome to both of you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Michael, let me start with you. To what extent does it matter to voters that our candidates are people of faith? And in your political experience, does it matter differently? Is it a different priority for conservatives versus liberals, Republicans, Democrats?
Well, if you look historically, it's really not a different priority. I mean, you look at William Jennings Bryan, who was a great Democratic leader, was also the most prominent evangelical in America. Or Martin Luther King, who was certainly seen on the left side of American politics, was very much informed by his faith. But this has increasingly become true in the last few decades in the Republican Party. And, we're seeing an election where both sides are trying to compete more for that vote rather than exclude the religious vote. I think that's been Obama's attempt.
Rabbi, we heard from Governor Sarah Palin last week, that came to light anyway last week, when she was talking about the war in Iraq, where her son is on his way to serve. She described the war as a task from God. And some people took exception to that and questioned whether it's appropriate to think of God being on our side or not.
Well, one of the things that we've discovered is that separation of church and state is not the same as the separation of a soul and state. That is, every politician, every person is going to be informed by their beliefs, and you can't sever that link. The difference is that whatever you believe, you have to defend it in terms that the whole polity can share. So I may think it's God's will, for example, to help hurricane victims, but I have to make that case in terms of the expenditure of public money and public compassion and so on. So we shouldn't, I think, feel uncomfortable that politicians believe certain things as long as they're able to frame the consequences of that belief in terms that everybody can debate about and decide about.
Michael, did you have an opinion about her expressing her faith that way?
Well, I mean, the millions of people in churches and other religious communities every week pray that God will guide their leaders into the ways of justice and truth. And, I don't think there's any problem with that. Franklin Roosevelt prayed for victory on D-Day in an address to the nation. I do have a little problem with that. I think that it's wrong to kind of say that God is on America's side. But it's a great American tradition to say that God is on the side of justice and the rights of the individual, and to pray that our leaders respect those basic beliefs, which often come in American history, motivated by faith.
To both of you, this question of what is the distinction between talking about our faith publicly, and whether as politicians, when politicians talk openly and express their faith, versus trying to impose their faith on Americans. And I actually spoke to President Bush about this in January of this year in Jerusalem. I sat down and we talked about this. This is a portion of the interview that ran on the Today program. And I asked him whether people misunderstood what his faith meant to him, whether it created a certain rigidity in his thinking. Here was his response.
Who aren't faith-filled people, who are suspicious of those who are, because I guess they believe that, one, I may think I'm better than them, or two, that somehow, I don't make rational decisions, from their perspective, but they're decisions based upon some metaphysical presence. I tell people that my faith is a personal journey that helps me find calm in the midst of the storm.
Michael, you know the president well, obviously. Where is the line between imposing one's faith as a leader and expressing it in a way that people can identify with?
I think the line is pretty clear. If you're talking about your beliefs about salvation, or the way the church should be organized, or the end of history, those things don't have much public consequence. But in all of American history and Western history, Your anthropology, your belief about human beings, their rights and destiny, has always had a public consequence. It was the foundation of the abolition movement. Many of those people were religious people that had a passionate commitment to individual rights and dignity. It was the foundation of the civil rights movement. You can't separate that belief in divinely given human rights and dignity, from the progress of justice in American history. And I don't think we should try.
Rabbi, quick comment?
Well, I think that that's essentially true. It all depends in what you believe God has sent you to do and in what way God sends you to do those things. I mean, a story that I always tell our children in religious school is about the kid who looks up at the heavens and says, God, you know, there's so much pain and anguish and suffering in this world. Why don't you send help? And God says, I did send help. I sent you. And if we can translate that into a sense of mobilization of public policy because of the combination of humility and purpose, then our faith really matters.